Lamberto Bava quickly followed up his classic with his 1986 sequel, Demons 2. Following a similar formula to the original, the film delves deeper into the self-awareness of horror films of the era and continues Bava's subtle swipe at our moral betters. I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, thanks for joining me. I do apologise. Once again, there was a week off. It was pretty unavoidable this time, guys. I had some very troubling stuff happening in my private life, and there was just no time over the weekend to get to a podcast. But I'm back this week, and pretty excited to talk about Demons 2. I honestly find this series, trilogy, arguably. I believe there's another one that Bava and Nelly had something to do with. Look, it's just a fascinating little thing. I think it's full of fun, and I think right off the bat it probably needs to be acknowledged that Demons 2 is really so obviously cashing in on. I imagine the original was quite popular anyway. It is a great film, as I discussed last week. But look, does Demons 2 break any new ground? I suspect probably not, but at the same time, it would have been easy to follow it up with a terrible film. And to be honest, it's sort of, in my mind, it was sort of always an assumption that's probably what would be the case before I'd seen it back in the day. And I think it's good. I think that it actually lives up to, or should I say, stands up to standards of the time, no question whatsoever. As a film in its own right, it's batting above the average of horror films in the era, and certainly of Italian horror films in the era. As I think I mentioned last week, there's a degree of things becoming a little bit unserious, shall we say, in horror films at the time. And I think these two Demons films are very embracing of that unseriousness, even really contributing to it. But at the same time, I feel like there's an extent to which you can get away with just about anything as long as the product that you put together is good. And, there was a lot of following up of the same formula. But at the same time, I think there are a couple of elements, don't get me wrong, I do prefer the original, quite clearly, but there are a couple of elements of this one that actually I think are arguably an improvement. I think it's on an equal footing when it comes to the 80s-ness of it all. Those weird, cheap ass musical parts. It's very, very corny, right? But we can accept that. But I think what I actually really, really do like about this film, even in relation to the original, is I think the film within a film aspect of it is so cool. And there's a part of me that thinks if this had been a really serious, as serious as a film like this could be, type of approach, it probably had the potential to be really, really decent. I think the atmosphere of the early parts of the film, the very early parts of the film when we're sort of seeing the TV, seeing the people watch the TV in the various apartments in the building, that I'm this is actually pretty cool. The atmosphere they build is great. I think the problem where it sort of does itself in a bit is within 4 or 5 minutes, even without, I suspect people without any knowledge of this film but are aware of the original, I think you can already see it's going to be just the same thing again. And it makes it a little bit predictable, but also probably to really build that creep, they would have been better probably waiting a little bit longer than they did. I feel like the action kicks into gear even quicker than the original. I might be wrong on that, but I think that was the charm of the original, right? In this one, I think it's slightly longer by about 5 or 6 minutes, and it feels it by the end. The original gets away with kicking into its action so quickly because I think the characters are so humorously written. The dumb dialogue in that's probably funnier than the dumb dialogue in this one. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. And also, I think it knew when to stop. Whereas, one thing I don't like about this film is the characters are genuinely unrecognizable to me. Like I had another little watch of it the other day, leading in order to prepare for this podcast, and I thought, so the two characters that survive, who are they? Like, genuinely, like for the whole course of the film, you're seeing different characters in different apartments, and I think one of the problems is sometimes someone will end up in an elevator, and they'll be with some girl, and you can't really keep track of who's who, or maybe you're not, or maybe I'm not motivated to keep track of who's who. But I'm like, I don't. Everyone's faces just mesh into each other. And look, again, I think this has just always been one of the issues with horror films. One is that it's written around events and, spectacle, and also very few horror films have like distinctive actors, as in not just actors that you recognize, but actors that are any good. So you just get these sort of generic actors, many of which are terrible, and you never gain any care for the characters. Ironically, the one character that we probably get some degree of care about is Sally. She's the only one whose name I can really remember. I might get the Wikipedia page up just so I can have a bit of a guide as we go along. But like, Sally's probably one of the most tragic characters in any movie ever. Like, she doesn't have a good time of it, does she? It's her birthday, and for some reason she's upset about that boy, and it's not really explained why she's upset. And then she goes to watch the film within the film, whatever the hell it is, and then a demon comes out and scratches her up, and then she turns into a demon, and everything's terrible. She kills all her friends, but she gets like one of the tougher runs of all the demons in each of these films, where like her pain just seems to be so drawn out. I'm like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just seems a bit unfair on it, but that's what you get for watching TV, which might be a bit of a theme of this. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, I don't think that I don't think this is like a massive change really at all from the original in terms of philosophy. I think I really went on probably ad nauseum about, if that's the right term, about the fact that Demons is actually about something, despite, seemingly no one ever acknowledging that. I think this film is very, very similar, right? It's again about what happens when it's like that sort of social commentary or ironic social commentary, so shall we say, about people watching horrific stuff and then turning into monsters. Does it delve deeper into it? Maybe it does a little bit, because there's something almost like slightly more social contagion about people doing it from their own homes, I think. Whereas, like, at least with the original, they had to actually make the effort to go to the cinema themselves. But also, I think, again, with that sort of scene that I was talking about earlier, with everyone in their different apartments watching the horrible stuff, you can always get that. I get the sense that like that's the depth of the film there, that they're really emphasizing, that sense that bad can come from watching TV. And the great thing, of course, is the irony, or my perception of it is that it is a very sort of, ironical take on the whole thing. So getting into the film, the start of these films just sounds so fucking 80s that it's almost unbearable, right? I'm sure you understand. I think I'm just trying to think. I think the original sort of cuts with the credits sort of meshed in with that train trip, whereas I think in this one it's just I think in this one it's just credits, but it's still got very 80s music, and it also just gives that sense it's going to be the exact same as the previous one. We get a little voiceover about movies, cinema being turned into demons or something, or as in everyone in the movie cinema being turned into demons. If memory serves, I think the voiceover is like the same for us as it is within a film. Certainly the content is very similar, and obviously that, that creates that sort of meta, self-aware type aspect of this film, which I think is cool. So I think in some way they're sort of a bit more conscious of their philosophy, or they're making us a little bit more conscious of their philosophy, which I think that's pretty cool. I think it's welcome. They want. There's a part of me thinks they probably want more so than the original did, for the audience to actually reflect on the content a little bit. At least up until the point that you stop caring, which is not long after the demon comes out of the screen. So, which is damn cool, and I'm getting to that. So I've always felt, or I felt for a long time anyway. In fact, I might even refer to Argento briefly. This isn't an exact like-for-like comparison, but I think you'll understand what I mean. Argento's films are famous for their style, for their sound, for their visuals. And there's that hilarious, famous quote from Argento: "The sound, it looks wonderful." I think that's the quote. I haven't butchered it. And stories were never his strength, or character development. But once he started believing his own press, which started with Inferno, but I think became well more I think it just probably grew from that, to be honest. I think his films went downhill. Now, I think that like the start of his career is genuinely unbelievable, right? Like genuinely unbelievable. And then, you can only do so much. You can only produce so many great things. But he was noted for his nonsense or not interesting stories, but noted for his style. Once he started believing that or thinking that, his movies went downhill, because I feel like style came naturally, but at the same time, there's at least like the basis of a plot in, say, Suspiria, and it's really a shitty plot. In some ways, all of his plots are the bloody same, right? And they're very, very similar. They're very they're almost written by a child. But the plots gave his films form. And the thing is, if you look, I haven't seen that Western he did in the 70s, but if you look at the all of his Giallo films up until, or all of his films other than that Western up until the Inferno, they're all held together by form, right? And it doesn't have to be much form, but it's something. So he works really, really hard on the plots that he's really, really not good at, and then everything else goes from there. Now, that's a big segue, but the problem with Demons 2 in relation to the original, and it's subtle, but it is a problem, is that Demons 2 doesn't really have any form. Now, you could say, in this, the apartment building / TV is the same as, say, the cinema/cinema screen in the original. But the problem is, I think in this one, those two concepts only really exist as a reference, or as trying to follow the formula of the original. And I think you can buy it. Like, there's something very intrinsic about the cinema aspect of the original. You know, with the guy at the start giving them tickets. It's like, part of it is like, this is a cinema experience. I think we've done the apartment building thing before. It is cool, like with shivers and stuff, but it always feels like an excuse just to have the to sort of have an expanded but, you know, sort of contained place to have the demons in. I just feel like it had less to say, or it had less form, and the form really just felt like an excuse for things to happen in this film, whereas the things that were happening within the cinema, it just felt more intrinsically linked to its sort of social comment, or its ironic social comment. In addition to that, there's very, very, very little character development in the original. But I think it's quite defined who our main characters are, right? There's the girl, then there's her friend, then there's the two horn dog guys, right? And then everyone else is sort of extra. This seems to have Sally, and everyone else is completely unidentifiable. And again, both of these films, aside from their context within the social commentary that I've mentioned, really exist to be fun, mid-80s, high-octane, violent, stupid horror movies, right? But the problem with Demons 2 is that's all it is. There's nothing else. There's nothing else there. There's no form. There's no way to get motivated and care for the characters. I feel like the original Demons asks you to care about the characters almost in a funny way. Like, you know they're mostly going to die. And as it turns out, they all die, I think. As in all the main four die. No, sorry. Actually, that one bloke survives. But that film almost felt like it was like imitating films, and that's obviously linked into the cinema thing as well. Whereas this is just like I was going to say just a bad film. It's bad at being a film. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad film. I mean, it's a ridiculous and stupid film, but I do like it. But yeah, I hope that was clear enough. I'm not sure it was. But hey, you don't come here for form. You come here for rants and stuff. Then, so I'm just trying to think if there's any others, but there's that Bobby Rhodes guy who's in this, who the only difference between his two characters in each film is that one is a pimp and the other is like a gym instructor, but that is it. There is no other difference, and it's sort of comical. And then the other character's that bloke, what was he called in the original? Like fucking Bruiser or something. Something stupid. And then this is like the apartment security guard or something. It's like, nah, I'm not buying that. And I think he's probably got a slightly different voiceover as well. But it's like the Bobby Rhodes one is clearly like a reference to the first film. Like, it's like, oh, this guy was in the original. But this guy who's like, well, I don't know, is he? Like, is that a reference to the original, or is it just that there's only so many actors and we'll just get him as well? And then that's the other thing about this film. It's so, Well, you would say it was confusing if it mattered, but this aspect probably doesn't matter. And that is like, is it a sequel in the sense that it follows on from the original? Does it exist in the same universe? And also, like, what if those things are the case? Are the aspects of the voiceover in the film within the film that keeps saying, "Well, could it happen again?" I feel like that says about 10 times, like in the space of a couple of minutes. Could it happen again? And they just keep saying it. Is that saying that within this universe has happened? Because at the same time, that film is a film, or is it saying that that is like a sequel to the original film, within a film? I don't know, right? It's like it's never clear. But see, I don't. As much as I find it funny and it's cool, I don't actually think it's like them being like really clear or whatever. I just suspect they just didn't make a decision, and it's like, let's just put some stuff in this film, right? And so we get a bunch of sort of pointless build up, right? There's a man with a knife who decorates party stuff, decorates a cake. We see a little boy in an apartment by himself. Maybe we can engage in some social commentary around that as we go along. There's a couple of idiots fooling around in an elevator. And see, this is the problem with this contained apartment thing. And I do like to indulge a little bit, self-indulge. I think I mentioned last week my experience with seeing demons in a like this sort of weird underground like film society thing a number of years ago, and that I had been introduced, or I had been given the ticket to it, having been in a train earlier that day that had reminded me, or earlier the day that I got the ticket, that had reminded me of demons. Then I went to this cool shop and the guy's like, "Hey, you should come see demons." Now I think about it, it's actually sort of almost as meta as the film itself. And with this apartment one, the second one, I sort of have my own selfish indulgent reasons as well, because I now live in an apartment building. And to be honest, of the apartment buildings in the area, if Demons 2 was to play out in real life, it wouldn't surprise me if it was in my building that it happened. So, just because there's some interesting characters around. The thing is, I think the scope, you have to be very careful with these things, right? I did a podcast on the film Shivers, the Cronenberg 1975 film, on the Horror Film Science podcast a couple of weeks ago, to get around that. That's based entirely in an apartment, I think, or at least in and around an apartment complex. And it's difficult, right, because you sort of want the whole structure of the film to be very insular. But at the same time, that can limit you too much. And I actually think that one of the flaws of Demons 2 is that I think they give you too many different characters, but they give none of them any meaning or substance. Let's be honest, again, with the exception of Sally. Sally is clearly this film's equivalent of Rosemary or Doretta from the original. But each character seemed, most of the characters seemed somewhat defined in the original, and that was largely, I think, because they distinguished them by like just showing them the cinema at the start, and they would have really, really defined characteristics, right? Like that, like the blind guy, for example, with his attractive wife, who was for some reason fooling around with that guy that seemed somewhat punching above his weight. And like Bobby Rhodes as a pimp, and the four main characters as the four main characters. Like everyone, you recognize them when you would see them in random scenes. You could see what they were doing. I don't know in this film if it's not just because like none of the characters. Like none of the actors have distinctive faces, or I think it's just because they cut around too often, and also because there's a lot of movement between the apartments, or at least I think there is, and like so many of the characters end up at the party that it's like you sort of lose motivation to actually follow what's going on, and also because everything that's happening is very like reminiscent of the original, where basically every character dies. Like, well, this is what's going to happen here as well. And if that's not made clear enough, Sally pretty much kills, or at least turns into demons, like just about everyone at that party. So like, and that's pretty close to the start. So like the remaining characters who sort of end up in various places, elevators and just different places in the apartment. You're like, well, we know from experience the extent of the death in these films, and there's no reason to think that it's not going to continue. So it's like we don't have any attachment to any of the characters, and then beyond that, we're probably just hoping that we see some cool deaths, right? Let's get some. Oh, also, yeah. I think it's worth noting, in a way, I think the charm of the original is how deliberately stupid the characters are. And again, I think that falls into the, it sort of falls into the, well, I guess it's just the charm. It's like that's what we accept. But the recognizability of the characters as well, right? Like they're all in very, very defined positions. Whereas in this one, all of them really seem the same as each other. Like every character is like, they seem to have the same kinds of motivations. There's not, I'm only really thinking about this now, but there's not really, none of the characters are assholes. And I know that probably seems a bit silly, but they all seem to have the same motivations. They're these sort of 80s idiots, and they get a bit like, they're all, you sort of suspect they're all not great people a while together, but they're all just like generic, right? I guess the one character that we don't know, that we know isn't good, is Jack or Jake or whoever the hell is coming. That they get a call, say, oh, he's coming, and then Sally gets upset. And which means the only recognizable, definable character is like, well, Bobby Rhodes again. And it's just because, like, oh, that's that idiot from the original doing the same thing in this one. So, yeah. So, I think it starts off really well. As I said, with all the different shots in the apartment, people watching TV. I also actually think what does work about the genericness, shall we say, of most of the stuff that's going on, that at least it does contrast quite nicely, I think, with what's happening, or what does start happening once everyone sits down and watches the movie. I like the way all the characters are sort of transfixed. Right, like Sally sort of storms off to her room very unreasonably when everyone's there celebrating her party. She seems genuinely upset. And it initially seems a bit stupid the way she's sort of intently watching this Demons movie. But then it shows, I think, the little boy watching it as well. There's even like a family in a different apartment as well watching it. It shows a few different people. And this is where I think it's really cool, because they're like, I think the film's really emphasizing that idea of people being transfixed and controlled by TV. In fact, thinking about it now, it probably feels to me that there might be that. Now, its issue is I don't think it lives up to this, right? Because it doesn't continue on. Like, it doesn't attempt to really delve into any kind of social commentary beyond the early parts of the film. But there is something very like self-aware, I think, about this like idea that people get consumed by the art that they're watching. And I think part of why that works is I don't think it relates so much to the ironic aspect of it. I think it's quite separate from that idea of people being turned into monsters. More just, it seems to be more of a commentary on TV and watching things, which of course is always ironic when it's put in a movie. But you know, that makes it for some really good scenes. There's that guy who's studying for his exam, and his girlfriend walks out of the room and asks him a question, and he very clearly reads the answer from his textbook, and the girlfriend obviously is too stupid to realise that that's very clear what happened. So the film within a film is, I love the purpose that it serves in this. One, it's still like not a film, but it's closer to a film than the equivalent in the original, which we see less of, but it serves for the building of atmosphere. But again, the problem with these types of films, or this type of approach to a film, is when most of your motivation is to just get to the damn point, and there's some real subtlety that you want to put in there, I don't think the two really marry up. Or at least they don't, because you can't really combine them at the same time. So it's sort of like there's some cool build-up stuff right in this film, which is great, but it's never at all linked to anything that happens, you know, once the event happens. Once the demon comes out of the TV, it doesn't get to live up to that build-up, because we're sort of done with that now. Whereas it just seems a bit separate, I guess, is the point. I know it's a very similar structure in the original, but I just feel like philosophically the two things are linked. Whereas in this, you know, I don't know if we can quite do the same extent of our TV turns us into monsters, because as a you know, ironic thing, because I think there's a little bit of an insinuation that maybe this film slightly agrees with that. But again, at the same time, probably the first half an hour or nearly half hour, however long it is, of this film is very, those aspects of it are very interesting. I think, like, they show quite a lot of the film within the film, and I just think, as lame and silly as it is, there's some really cool scenes. Like, for example, it's a much, when I say some really cool scenes, I think there's really two. One is when they find the demons, and I think I have to acknowledge, I've talked about Black Sunday or The Mask of Satan, Lamberto Bava's dad, Mario Bava's 1960 film. And I know I noted it when I watched it for the podcast, which was episode 6, I think. But I don't know if I noted it on the podcast. This rather humorous moment where I think it's based in the 1600s, and there are these guys looking through a crypt, and they open the crypt up and they find the Barbara Steele, but I think she's skeletal at the time or whatever. But they're not at all fazed by the fact that she's there, or that they can still see her or whatever. It's not like they reacted as if, you know, you would react to a bird just standing on the street or something. Like, it's so odd. And in this film within a film, it's very similar. Like, I don't know what these characters are meant to be doing in it. They're sort of wandering around some creepy place, but like they go to this place, and there are these demons that are just lying there quite intact. And the only thing that's amazing or worth noting to these characters is the one guy who's like, oh, these are demons, these are real demons. But it's like, yeah, but they're also bodies, and then It's just a bit like, and I almost feel like it's like a deliberate reference to Black Sunday or the Mask of Satan in that stupidity. And it is worth mentioning, which I think I might have last week, that the mask from the original is very reminiscent, if not the same, as the mask in the Mask of Satan. So there you go. Let's get to these notes again. The other thing that's cool about the film within a film is, and I remember the first time I watched this, there's something a little bit like, you can sort of tell something's up. So it runs off, the stupid demon runs off, right? I don't know, I can't remember if it kills anyone, but it runs off sort of screen within a screen. And then it comes back. And there's something about the atmosphere, maybe there's a lack of music, or maybe it's the way Sally's watching the TV or something, that I think instinctively when I first watched it, I thought, this is different now, right? She's watching something different. And I love how he sort of notices her from within the screen. I mean, this is such a cool concept, right? The only thing that lets down about it, and it might be just a technology thing, although they do get some good shots, I think I wanted to see the demon come all the way out of the screen. And maybe you could argue that if they'd showed that, like, they would have killed off the suspense they had, because, you know, there is that point where Sally thinks it hasn't come out of the screen, and then it appears and, you know, scratches her or whatever. But, like, I think those shots as it's coming closer towards the screen are so cool. And the concept of it coming out, the concept of it noticing her from within. And also just on first viewing, going, is this what's happening? And, you know, it's very much like a sequel thing trying to sort of one-up the original in terms of concepts. Like, in the original, it was just sort of, you know, that mask, it's sort of really unclear. But in this one, it's like, no, it'll just come straight out and do it. But so cool. I just love the concept. And look, from there, the film's largely a box of shit, let's be honest. There are some cool moments and some hilarious moments, but so I don't know if you guys felt this. And it happens, again, it's probably part of the charm of Demons, but it only just is. Where they would do that thing where there'd be a lot of build-up, like a lot of build-up, and then there'd be a quick shot of the demon, and then there'd be a rah, there'd be something, and then you might see a little bit of the violence, but then it would just cut to another scene. And it's sort of funny. I think it's sort of efficient, but I feel like they were somewhat attempts at jump scares, but not really, because there's a certain vacantness to it, especially when I think we all know it's coming. So that happens to Sally. The demon comes out, and then she's a bit relieved. I think she tries to turn the TV off, or maybe she does turn it off. And then it cuts, and the demon's standing behind her. All right. I can't remember if we see it scratch her up or whatever, but I'm pretty sure I think the first shot just cuts away. Then, you know, as carnage is beginning to break loose, I'm probably jumping around of order here, but like, then there's that scene where there's that girl in the sauna, and it's this really lengthy scene, and then it sort of cuts back and forth, and there's some guy in the room there's like acid blood dropping on his face or something, but it doesn't seem to be hurting him that much. And it's this long build up, and then the payoff is, I think it's meant to be funny, but it's like there's only so many of these that you can have, and it's funny because it's so It's almost funny. It's funny because it feels like it's almost winking at us like that was meant to be suspenseful, but it's not. So she's in there for a while, and then like the camera's very slowly panning from one side to the other, and then we don't see like the face of the demon or anything. We just sort of see it casually walk up to the sauna and then like smash it down on her. I don't think we find out the result. Presumably she's burning, but it's sort of comical because of like just how unfilm it usually is, right? Films usually like to go, look, here's the monster thing, enjoy. Whereas it's sort of like, it's almost laughing, it's giggling along with us, saying, well, we're not really going to show that much, but it's just this sort of weird vibe. Or at least what happens usually with these suspense things is, you know, maybe the monster will, or the monster or the killer will encroach on the shot that we're used to, but then we'll cut to another shot that sort of emphasizes our shock, and it's the power for the suspense. We don't get another shot. It just sort of enters the shot, closes it, and that's the end. Again, I don't know if we actually see her again, but it's just like, as funny as that is, there's too many aspects of this film that are like that. It is very much like the original, and the original probably takes it a little bit too far as well. It's like, also maybe we just want to see the carnage properly, or appreciate the carnage properly. I also make note of the fingernails thing, how in the film within a film it spreads with fingernails. Is that, I don't know, is that like an AIDS thing? As in, by that I mean, I know there was a lot of ridiculous fears with AIDS at the time. Maybe I should have researched this. But yeah, like it just seemed like maybe a reference to something stupid, just the idea of something spreading in a way that's probably not actually going to. Yeah, so as I said, I probably cut around a little bit. I think one of the last great shots or moments in the film is Sally's transformation, and that's genuinely great. And I've thought this forever, probably said it last week. The reason Demons is a success, I think, or not the reason, but if it didn't have this, it wouldn't be a success, just shall we say, is that for all the stupidity and all the comedy, I think it's genuinely creepy and genuinely scary. And I don't mean, I can't deal with this. I mean, in terms of like the way it's shot, the atmosphere, like the way Doretta looks, everything's like really effective in terms of horror. And like at the end of the day, you know, you're watching a stupid 80s horror flick. You know there's going to be ridiculous music. The story's going to be stupid. There's going to be a lot of sort of camp qualities to it. But if it's not good at being a horror film, it's still not going to be good. And the original is very good at that. I still think this film is, but the reason it's probably not as good, well, the reason it's definitely not as good as the original is probably because it only really survives on good horror scenes, and they're few and far between. So Sally's transformation is amazing, honestly, and I actually think it's really cool the way they do it with everyone singing happy birthday to her, because it is actually sort of conceivable that they wouldn't notice what's going on, like how she's all fucked up. Maybe they still think she's just upset because she went to her room in a tanty, and then, you know, we can see the veins in her arms changing. I guess, you know, there's possibly a certain degree of disappointment in not being able to, what would you say? Not being able to have more of these transition scenes. Like I've always thought, and I'll probably do a podcast on this over the coming weeks, on the Horror Film Science podcast. The film Scanners, also a Cronenberg film. there's that famous scene, that famous head explosion scene, right? But the problem with that happening is that you're like, well, this is what we're getting in Scanners. There's going to be heads exploding, but of course the effect was so amazing, they're not going to be able to do that many times. So what you get is just people being distressed and stuff. You only get one head explosion, and it's sort of almost like Jaws. You know, early on they kill the kid, and you're like, well, fuck, anything's possible here. And then it's like Jaws is still great, obviously, but it's like it sets you up to keep you on edge. But so I think it really happens with both Demons films. But to be fair, I think this is the best transformation, albeit the best friend one, the girl in the original, that is fucking cool. And how her voice goes all weird and like, who are you? Or all that, like, that's actually fucking cool. And like, and then that demon comes out of her back, and he's like, look at her back, and the demon runs off. It's not, but like, again, that's why that's a good horror film. That's why that's a good film, because at the end of the day, there are some fucking sensational horror film moments, and this just doesn't have that many of them. So Sally transforms, and look, I think this scene, because it's uncomfortable, it's also hilarious how she just sort of runs around slashing up everyone, and it's like, it's so funny when you put together a film that you know that everyone who goes to see it isn't going to take it that seriously, right? you know that the audience isn't going to be too concerned about like the logistics or what are the rules here. So sometimes the demons feel like they are like aiming to kill people, right? In either of the films. Other times it looks like they're just wanting to turn them into demons. So like Sally doesn't really seem, I can't remember, she probably does like directly kill someone, but like she just sort of runs around scratching everyone up, which turns them into demons. But it's like, it's so ill-defined what the scope is here. But then, like, on top of that, there's that aspect, speaking of what's ill-defined. A couple of times in this film, characters, like, say stuff, but then it cuts and they're demons. So, but again, it's like they don't explain, because definitely there's not enough time for them to have gone from like totally normal to a demon. So it's like, okay, so what are we doing here? Like that happens with that little kid. Let's talk about the little kid. And again, this is the problem with the way these films go, is like, do they have lofty enough ambitions, or do they have things that weren't developed well enough? So, you know, there's some kind of minimal, even lazy social commentary, I think, in the idea of this kid being left alone, sort of like, because he gets a call from someone, I can't remember if it's made clear who, and he's like, I'm here by myself, my parents are out or something. Like the film wants, like, it's pretty obvious he's there by himself, but the film wants us to reflect on the fact that he's there by himself, right? Like what are the parents doing? And of course he's a little boy. I just referred to Jaws, and I think, again, one of the reasons that, maybe the main reason that scene with the boy getting eaten is so effective is that it's a kid, right? So I feel like if you're gonna kill a kid or you're gonna turn them into a demon, you probably should make the most of it. And I do like the subtlety of the way I think some blood drips on the kid, and we don't really find out that he's a demon until it's dramatically revealed. But like, It's very. It's look. I don't think it quite works in the way I want it to work. I guess is probably the fairest way to put it. He's like this sort of hypercharged demon when he opens the door, when the woman opens the door for him, and it actually just reminds me a lot of Chucky from Child's Play, which I know they can't be blamed for because that came out after this. Maybe they stole it from this. I doubt it somehow, but yeah, it's just a little bit unserious. But far be it from me to claim that Demons Toys should be more serious than Child's Play. And look, honestly, I don't know if there are too many scenes from this point that are, particularly worth mentioning. Well, actually, there are different. It's just like everything meshes into one. I will say that the transformation of that dog. I've got to say that's got every aspect of a transforming dog that you could want in a horror movie is really encompassed in this, and it is. You can never get them to look good, right? There's been possessed dogs, there's been possessed cats in Italian horror films, and I'm sure other films, and there's always going to be a scene where you can tell it's just some bloke with a puppet. So it's a great concept, and see, part of the brilliance of it again is it's so ill-defined. These films hadn't gone to animals being transformed until this point, I don't think. But the thing that's so fucking funny about this scene is you get these really, really cool shots, right, of the dog transforming and like its teeth coming out and stuff, and it's fucking cool. But they try to mesh it in with other images by just using sound effects. So there's a couple of shots sort of in between seeing the dog transform where we see the dog sort of running, and it's very, very clearly just that dog running, but they mix it in with the sound effects of it sort of roaring or something, and it's like trying to pass off of that. I just think it's really funny. Also, what I find funny is partly like the effects of the change look good, but when it starts moving around in puppet form, plus the music in the background, it reminds me of a Goosebumps episode. Like, not a specific one, but that scene, once it becomes unserious, well, it's probably unserious the whole time, like literally you could just put that scene in a Goosebumps episode and it would be the same. And yeah, I fucking love Goosebumps, I'm not going to deny it, but there's a certain production value that it's lacking, and in an actual feature film probably should be a little bit better than that, I guess is what I'm saying. Other notable events, the chase scene up the elevator, or the elevator string things, good in theory, okay in practice, but like unbelievably slow. There are times in this film where I feel as though it actively is making sure there's no suspense, because as much as there is factually suspense about this guy being chased up the escalator wires by a demon, they seem to be the same distance apart from each other the whole time. You also, for some reason, get the sense he's going to make it to the top. But the other thing is, we don't give a fuck about him anyway. I actually can't remember which character it is. I don't even know if it's the dude that survives in there. I don't fucking know. So, like, the thing is, these two films, they're so full of energy. And I don't think you can just say, oh, well, let's make this scene that's a really cool concept, but also pretty dumb. Let's just remove this of all energy and just think that that's going to give it suspense. Whereas I think all it does is make it contrast with the other scenes in a way that's like, well, why does this one matter? It's not. No one cares. The music doesn't care, right? I don't know. The guy doesn't even seem that fucking concerned about even living. So why should I care about him? Yeah. All right. What are some final thoughts that I can consider? Oh well, of course, that Asia Argento is in it. I think it's her debut. Asia Argento has really, over the course of her life, with the help of being introduced to Hollywood, she's become more famous than Dario, I think, which, as in not more credibility, but and then obviously all that stuff that happened with Me Too, and she did that speech. I don't know if it was in Congress or something, but she did that speech. But her very undignified entry to the acting business, I believe this was her first film as a little girl in Demons 2, and it's got to be said, moment of genuine sadness when she sees her very well trained dad doing these moves, sort of ducking under demons and fighting them with some kind of pole or stick or something. I can't quite remember, but inevitably he gets surrounded and destroyed, and Asia Argento is there just going, Papa, oh no, Papa, and it's like, that's pretty sad, I guess. So yeah, she's, to be fair, I think you can tell she's actually an actor, right? Like, she actually seems to have a degree of talent. And of course, as is always the case with the dubbing, if a character or an actor doesn't have a massive role in films, it's not easy to tell. But I don't know, I think her expressions and whatnot, I think she did a really good job. Her mum dies as well. Everyone dies. It's very sad. I'll also make mention, just another criticism. Way too much of this film happens in that fucking parking lot or whatever it is at the bottom. Like, fucking hell. So Bobby Rhodes, I think, ends up dying in there, and it's like he has like literally the same thing, right? He sort of appoints himself the big muscly leader like he does in the original. He designates people some weapons. What's that line? I can't remember if he gives someone like a fire extinguisher or something. It's like, the guy says, I don't know how to use this. He's like, well, read the instructions. I hope I wrote this down. It's got to be, because it's so fucking funny. One of those classic fucking Demons lines. So yeah, I feel like he dies in a mundane way as well. So yeah, the two characters that are at the end that we can't remember end up on the roof, just like happens in the original when it's the roof of the cinema, and they parasail, is that the right term, down the side of the building, and the girl's scared, and the guy's like, it's just like the courses we took last summer. And see, again, like that idea of just like everything about character building in this film is so off. It's like it's trying to give some background to these people. Like, you didn't fucking do any courses last summer. You only existed from the start of this film. Like, that's the problem, right? So they go into the TV, something that's just next door. And then at this point you're like, so much of this is just the exact same as the original, right? Like, they've just stolen everything. And I guess they're like, seems like a safe, the guy I think just seems like a safe enough place. Cool. I like that, because it's sort of like, of course, television safe, haha. And it's not. And then, Sally comes back having been, I think, stabbed through the stomach. She comes back and she's blind, and then she dies. And it's like, well, fucking hell. They've really brutalised Sally through this film. I think it's just a bit unfair. Because none of the other characters who turn into demons seem to have to go through the same amount as she does. Like, she has to be upset on her birthday, then she sort of gets murdered, turns into a demon, and she kills all her friends. But then all her friends, we don't really see all the horror they have to go through. She runs through the building. You know, we see more of her, and she just seems to be more deteriorated than the other characters. Her transition seems the most extreme. She gets stabbed in the stomach. She goes blind. I don't remember them explaining how she goes blind, but she does. And then she just dies. I like that idea of her getting like that, those shots of her, or that, again, that super meta aspect of her, like, turning in, well, coming alive in the TV screen and them smashing that. I think that's cool. Don't think about it too much, but that's cool. And then the film ends, and it's like, yeah, I guess so. Look, I hope that didn't come across too much like I don't like it, or that I like think it's terrible or something. I mean, it probably is terrible, but it is genuinely good fun. It's just that it's not as good fun as the original. It's like everything about it is, let's do the original again, but it just doesn't quite work, right? And I don't know, like, I think that's sort of understandable. It's just sort of the way it is sometimes, right? And especially in the context of what was happening in horror film and Italian horror film at the time, like, it's pretty good. There's some films, I think, that, like, you know, all those endless zombie films, like that were like Zombie 7, Zombie -4, all of these films that, like, I think of that era, like the sort of death knell of the great era of Italian horror films. These are the pre-part of that. Almost sort of something by themselves where they're still good. They are reflective of where it was going, but they're still good films. And yeah, so I've had a lot of fun talking about it. I think what I'm going to do for the next 3 weeks, and again, barring any unforeseen circumstances like I've had quite a lot of recently, it will be every week now. I'm going to do a Sergio Martino triple. I believe, and I will do it in order of years. I believe, subject to being able to access a proper version of it, I will be doing The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. It's not a film I've ever seen before, and I'm just trying to think. I don't think on this show I've ever done a film that I've just picked up for the purpose of the show I hadn't watched previously. And that's also similar for my horror film science podcast, which, with the exception of the first ever episode I did, which was the new Halloween film. So, yeah, that's cool. I'll be having my first ever thoughts about it. But if it's not that, there's some late 60s and early 70s Sergio Martino films I'm going to do. That I can select from. And that'll be next week. And then the week after will be Torso, which is clearly his acknowledged classic. And then the week after that will be The Mountain of the Cannibal God. So do join me for those. It's been really fun talking about Lamberto Bava's films. What is it? Macabre from 2 episodes ago, which was really, really fun. And these 2 films are in some ways even more fun, you know. So I hope you enjoyed listening to it. I hope that my ramblings made a little bit of sense. And do indeed join me next week for the first of the Sergio Martino triple. Have a great week, everyone.